have my script up.
All right. Welcome back. Episode 5 of CorNbReaD, Salty Sweet, and Right on Time. I'm Dr. Hip with my guys, Ash and Kurt. We are with you for another episode of context, conversation, dialogue, and empowerment. We want to welcome you back to episode 5. If you haven't been tuning in with us, we would encourage you to check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Eat More CornBread. Definitely subscribe to our website at eatmorecornbread.com. You can definitely reach out to us if you have questions about anything that we're discussing in our actual episode. We are open to dialogue and communication, so send us an email at thatgoodcornbread@gmail.com. So tonight, fellas, I have a topic of discussion that I wanted to open up with, and I think you're going to appreciate it because we've had several conversations around these ideologies, but I think it's great to put it in layman's terms, and I think it's great for our viewers to really go deep with us in reference to the conversation. So when we talk about sheeple versus people, so most people would say, sheeple, what is sheeple? Like, what is that? Literally, sheeps. And when we think about sheeps, they're an easy breed, right? It's like Simon Says almost, right? Doesn't take much to get them to go left and get them to go right. And so I want to unpack that tonight. I want to unpack us thinking about ourselves in the world day to day, either as sheep and or as people, and talk about reflecting on where we stand in that. Do we understand what that means? Are we following scripts in life that put us in place and position to do what we want, or are we living someone else's narrative that was established way before we got here? And you're doing that while carrying around your own flame inside you, knowing you desire something else. So let's get into it. I wanted to first talk about scripts. I brought that up, because again, the more I realize my time on this earth and things that I've done and the things that I'm interested in doing, I'm always trying to self-reflect and figure out not only am I doing enough, am I doing what I want in reference to my thoughts, my passion, my purpose. We all follow scripts, right? Would you both agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
We all follow scripts, and I think there's nothing wrong with having a foundation to your start in life. If you are of legacy in terms of your parents set up your life a couple of generations back. Your grandparents set you up. You may have a trust fund. You may have financially responsible parents who their parents taught them how to be responsible. And, you are in a situation when they're starting your life that you have means and resources and, also with the responsibility of possibly carrying that on. But that, let's say if your mother or father may have been a doctor, dentist, a lawyer, or something like that, you're pressured to be in that space. You're pressured possibly to say, I must do that. So I'm going to go along with the Americanized process of go to school, get a good education, make my parents proud, get me a home, have a family, have some kids maybe, when all along inside you want to be a rock star, But you have that pressure to follow that script. So I wanted to get into some of that. What do you guys think about that?
Man, all right. So
I know it's a lot. If we're gonna peel back the onion, let's peel back the onion though.
You start with what you know, right? So, and we go. You got to keep. Jesus, man, what you doing to us today? Jesus.
Well,
it's perspectives, right? So we gonna keep in mind perspectives here, but I'm gonna get to that a little bit later. But it's what you go with. You start with what you know. Where I'm from, what I know is it's red on this side, blue on this side. And that's what you know for a while. And that's the only right and wrong for a while until you get out and you see there's other things. So the scripts there are, that's just how we wired. We have to kind of pay attention to what's around us. We do that, emulate that because we don't want to be cast out from, what's right next to us. We don't want to be ostracized from our immediate, social circles. And then you get exposed to other ideas and things like that that might cause you to want to flip the script or change the script or things like that. So you start with what you know, and then you grow into some new expectations with new experiences.
Yeah, that's This is a whole lot. So
Wow.
you talk about scripts. I mean, a script can be created from so many different things. It is created, honestly, from everything. You're talking about past experience. You're talking about oftentimes our scripts are defined by what's been handed to us, as it relates to family dynamic, as it relates to trauma, as it relates to our experiences. We often find ourselves sitting in a seat of a script that has been tossed to us. And we are generally making the best. How do we know? Because we always use things like, well, this was the hand that was dealt. We use this type of language to define the script that we have. And oftentimes people start kind of like what Curtis is saying, start from what you know. And for most people, context of what they know is their family, their immediate circle, the things that are around them that gives a sense of context of who they are. And that is the script they follow. But there are much deeper things. There's some really innate, divine, if you will, purpose things that are down inside of a person that beg the question, because even when you said, Curtis, like start with what you know, but then the question is, well, what do I know? Right? Then when we start asking that question and start picking out what you really know, and then what you think you really know, and then what you know about what you know, it starts unraveling, and then you realize, wait, what is the script that I have in my hand? And honestly, so because even starting with what you know, and I think that is an excellent point, you should start with what you know. I think you also need to have a healthy space of being able to challenge what you know. And that the light that you're walking under needs to be able to be challenged by a greater light so that you are able to redefine and constantly review your script, so that it is being authentic and fine-tuned to what is supposed to be. Well, I don't know if I want to say the word supposed to be, but I want to say more or less defined in the true authenticity that you're trying to get out of your own script, right? That's the main idea.
Let me ask this question.
If I want to make sure before you do that, though,
go ahead.
You got to answer that same question, because I feel like we about to be jumping in on each other here in a minute. This is the light part. That's for the show. I think this is let's let that go, because I want to hear what you want to say about that.
Well, so for me, I'm trying to, even help our viewers really understand like the narratives to these scripts. I personally believe that, to Ashley's point and to your point, Kurt, we are either gifted them or we are trying to emulate something to follow for our identity purposes, to not feel lost, to not feel vulnerable, to not feel alone. We're going to get into kind of like the validation piece around the scripts and following social media, and trying to have identities there where we fill voids, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the notion of having a script from the sheep aspect, there's aggressions there that are conflicted, but I understand them because, again, we didn't ask to be here. So when you're not asked to be here and you're trying to survive, you're trying to figure out, who you are, whose you are, where you're going, you're going to try to latch on to something. And you want to latch on to something because it's lonely to be alone. It's lonely to feel alone, But I think we still have to look at that script in terms of, is it ours? Despite if I want to follow something or not, am I listening to myself and being able to see either if I'm coming from a laid out script for me, or if I'm latching on to something that inspires me, am I lost in that or not? And am I able to like hear my own voice in that, hear my own thoughts, hear my own plans, and pivot, maybe use, right, what I need from those things that are out there as cues for me while I'm navigating down that path of the unknown that I'm not afraid of. I've worked with a lot of different clients that talk about, identity being a very important piece of them finding themselves, regardless of the stage of life they're in, whether they are starting out in career, deep in career, middle career, because they aren't used to redefining their own script for themselves. We are satisfying, again, I go back to how we're all not brainwashed in America, but like we're all laid out with the rights of what should happen to us as a thriving citizen in this country, whether that fits our mode or not. And so I wanted to kind of get into some of that, how does one recognize if they are being a sheep? I know it's heavy. What does that look like? What tips can we actually give to someone if they find themselves in a pattern, because you don't even sometimes know you're in that pattern because you're just doing what you were told when you were in grade school, what the outcome should be. And you may get so deep into your adult life, your young adult life, your adult life, really trying to meet the metrics of those things, and you're lost. You're lost. And it has nothing to do with, maybe money or even material things. It's that I go back to that identity piece. It's that, do I really love me? Am I doing what makes me happy? Am I making this money because it matches my purpose, or am I just keeping up with the upkeep of the herd?
So that's how you do it, right? You did you go through that process of asking those questions, or did you just mimic the steps? Because if you ask yourself the questions and you probably came across why am I doing this? Why would it matter to me? And if it's going to be something that's worthwhile, that means it'll take some time. So you needed that why to sustain you through all the work. So you have to have asked yourself those questions. And if you didn't, it happens a lot. Like with information, did you ask yourself, where did the information come from? Who benefits it? Like, you gonna get into the media here in a minute, but we talking about walking the steps. And again, we start by mimicking our parents. We got to learn to walk and do all of these things. Eventually we're exposed to some ideas that didn't come from our parents, and that's when you start questioning and challenging. We get into issues with our parents, and we get into issues with some of the friends that maybe we had for a long time, and then I moved away and came back, and it's like, whoa, I have a different idea. But it's that exposure to those new ideas and being aware enough that it's a different idea, and I can ask questions to understand that and compare it to what I know now. If I didn't go through those processes and I'm just kind of absorbing whatever comes in, I'm probably being hurted. We should be careful about that.
That's good, being hurted, honestly. But that's the key. I think asking the questions, allowing yourself the space to really get in touch with your why, and be honest about it, and still be careful, because even though you may have an answer to why, doesn't mean you're not being hurted, because your why could be the why of, well, your why may be grandma did it, mama did it,
of someone else,
right?
Someone else. Yeah.
But I think that there is a sense of, when especially the aspect of why, but then also the aspect of obligation, especially obligations that put pressure on you that lead to performance and not to purpose.
Performance.
Things that lead to performance and not to purpose is a true defining line of when you're being sheeple versus people. When you feel that you have to fulfill a certain role, or fulfill a certain duty, or fulfill a certain obligation, or fulfill a certain office, and yet not getting the true satisfaction or joy or even purpose behind it, then likely we are in a guise of a person, as opposed to the feel of that person, of who we are.
Yeah. Are we sheep?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's hard, right? It takes effort to think all the time, to ask these questions all the time. But all right, so are we sheep? Sometimes I just listen to my boy's advice on what movie to watch. I don't do that all the time. And then if I watch the movie, I might not necessarily like it, so we'll have something to talk about then. But we got to ask those questions why a lot, right? Sometimes I'm not doing that. I'm tired. I just want to know what's the fastest way to get from here up 495, and I just listen to the news, right? I'm not really trying to analyze the information. I just need something to digest so I can take some actions. And then some things are important to different people. So when I mentioned perspectives earlier, is some people are paying more attention at different times than others. So we get into a very dangerous situation where I'm just going to collectively generalize this group of people who, at this moment, from my perspective, I think they're not thinking. So I'm going to call them sheeple. And it's almost meaningless. We know what it means, right? It means not thinking, and a bunch of people not thinking things through, not going through the thought processes we talked about earlier. But
not acting, right?
How do I look out and say these people are being sheeple without interviewing every one of them? We can't,
And to your point, I agree with you. Like, are we sheep? Yes. I can take you in many different walks, right, to answer this question. I know I'm a pastor and preacher, and we are the sheep of his pasture. Yes. But at the same token, taking that concept and taking this understanding of what it means about being sheep, that means you are led by something, right? And everyone is led by something. I don't care what your belief system is. You are led by something. Even if you believe that there is nothing out there, you are led by that thought. So you are a sheep in that, right? There is a belief system. There's something in you that is driving you and leading you into something. And so with that, in an aspect, like he's saying, we all are sheep at sometimes, and being a sheep is not necessarily always a bad thing. To have someone to
Black
lead
sheep.
you as to have something that leads you and that directs you, that gives a covering for you, or that gives protection for you, or you find provision from, is not bad things. These are things that are essential to our makeup and to life. And so, yes, are we going to find ourselves in a space of being sheep? Yeah, absolutely. It's a part of our makeup, and it's a part of our experience as people. And so the question really then is, what are you being led by? Which kind of brings us back to the context. If I'm going to be a sheeple, right, or stand up and be the full person that I'm supposed to be, or designed to be. Does that make sense?
That's good. No, that's good right there. That's a beautiful transition place too, actually. And Curtis, I saw your face, and I'm gonna let you say something in a minute because I feel like you need to get something out. But I just want to bring some summation to it. So, I think what everybody is saying is that at times, for inspiration or for self-delegation or to follow systems that have been built for you, we have to succumb to that, whether for our start or for our rhyme and reason for existing. But we still have to know why we are doing those things so that we don't get caught up in relying on those things as our validation, as our identity, without really knowing who we are under the sheepskin, if you will. And I think that's key. And I wanted to say it like that because you're right. You don't get a say in terms of growing up when you're being told, go to school, go to school, you go get a good job. If you're in the DMV area, you go get a good government job, you go get you a house, get married, have some kids, have that American dream. And I think, my conflict with the sheep versus sheeple versus people piece is the system doesn't really continue the narrative. All right. So if you do those things, then what? Are you happy at the end of that? Or even throughout that process, are you finding yourself in those phases and ensuring that that's where you want to be aligned with? That's what you want as a part of your accepting of life, humanity in the world. There's a script, like there's a formula, right? It's been laid out for us. Do you totally subscribe to it? Do you buy into it? And if you do, does it stop with the 2.5 kids or, the picket fence? Are there additional conversations that you're having with yourself along that journey where you can actually set some additional markers to say, all right, if that's my goal and I'm going to get that, have I forgotten about me? Or who am I? Who am I with these things that I have? Or if you've been chasing that and you hadn't been successful in acquiring those things, but you spent 10 to 15 years trying, and again, you may not know who you are, whether that's professionally, whether that's socially, personally. And I wanted to state that as we transition over to looking at sheeple versus people from the last decade of the social media world, and how we've literally allowed that to be a part of a communication process in our lives for what we see. Back to your point, Curtis, to what we follow, because again, it's the script for us that we have in front of us, whether you do it to the T or not, is creating that lane for you to pursue. If you lack the purpose, you can latch on to someone else's and start seeing yourself in that light or willing that life to you. And you may not actually be doing anything to align yourself to those outcomes, but the visualization of it is so tangible through sight that you hold on to it as a new form or a new script to follow that could waste more time. I wanted to open that up. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think that's real. I think the thing about social media, I can paint whatever script I want. It's a blessing.
Say that a little louder, huh?
I can paint whatever script I want, right, with social media. And that's the blessing and curse of it all, right? I can show you what I want to show you, and I have the right to show you what I want to show you. And that should be our stance and right in life, for me to show you what I want to show you. Everyone has the obligation or the space in life to show anyone what they want to show you. However, when you become into a space of following people, right, you have to go with a full awareness that you're following someone who is showing you what they want to show you.
Say that again for the people in the back.
Say that again for the people in the back. With a full awareness that they're only showing you what they want to show you. And so you have to consider the total script, right? And you may not have access to all of their script. And one, you shouldn't, because you need to do what? Mind your business, right? We have to be careful of that, right? Of wanting to be having access to everyone's script. Why are you so consumed Why are you so consumed about someone else's script when you are so out of touch of your own script, right? And but social media does that for us, and we do it for the likes, we do it for the gram. I got to get my picture right, I got to get my video right, I got to get the likes. How many people like my post? How many people like even and any of us can fall in it. When I drop our little clip, sometimes how many people viewed it? How many people shared it? How many we can fall into that so many times. How many people subscribe? How many people we fall into that because we use that as our validation for our script.
Yeah.
But the true matter of fact is we are only interacting with people on a surface level, right, as it relates to social media. And it was not driven or created for us to go deeper in that aspect, right? Can you? Yes, but it's not created for that, right? It's created for mass publication. It's created for mass connection, right? But real authentic relationships have always been personal connection, right? And being able to go deeper in that, right? But we have to be mindful with the tool of social media. It can be a great tool, but as we do it, we're only seeing what people are reflecting to us to see.
I don't think anybody raises their hand and says, "Yeah, I'm a sheeple." The type that we're talking about, right? The type that comes to mind when you hear sheeple, right? The ones that follow just Fox News or just CNN, or and when you hear them talk about those types of topics, it's almost word for word, like they didn't do any of the processing. And we scroll through headlines all day, and you might report to somebody, your wife or your significant other, and you say, "Oh, did you see the headline that says such and such?" And then there's the other step beyond that says, "I believe, what this headline reported," and you don't do any critical thought about that, and you get it from. It can come from anywhere. It can come from the church. It can come from your boys. It can come from parents. All of those social structures that we trusted to kind of inform us how to navigate the world. If we're not questioning those things, again, you run the risk of being hurted. And what that means is you might reach an end that's not really where you want to go. And that's kind of what the point of being a sheeple is are you thinking this through, and are you getting to a point that you want to be? Because if you're not, then you probably run the risk of being in that category. But of course, if you have thought that thing through, and you don't have to answer questions to nobody, but you got to know it in yourself. I did do the thought process to get to where I wanted to go, to get to the conclusion that it's okay for me to report this information, or okay for me to kind of follow this information as it is true, because I did that work. And if I didn't, I'm kind of just hoping that information gets me there. And that's kind of what sheep do, right? I hope that person in front of me knows what they're doing, because I'm just following. And if you're doing that, yeah, use a sheep. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Stop doing that.
Pretty much. It's a beautiful topic, man, because this is the world we live in. And like I said, I don't think there's a right or wrong to it, because again, to Ashley's point earlier, we've had to pick up the ball somewhere to know how and where to go. But I like what you just stated, Curtis, about trying to make sure you can delineate your why, your what in that space and process, to make sure you're getting what you need from who you may want to follow, or who you want to emulate, or who's actually empowering you in that space, to make sure that you can pick up the baton and move it. I think that's to the reality. Social media is a beautiful tool. It creates means and modes like this one, where we can actually mass produce content and information to connect, to empower, to infuse, and so forth. But I think the psychology of it over the last decade has lost bounds, which it should for evolutionary purposes. But, when I see people, who exhibit sheeple tendencies online, in terms of you have an argument on social media, or you are, you're like, and again, you can do what you want on your own social media. It's your thing. It's no fault there. There's no judgment there. But it's just thinking about the realities, to your point, Ashley, of what you put out there. That's what you want people to see. And sometimes it can have a negative connotation for you, right? You may want to floss and put out there that, life is going developmentally well for you. At the same time, you might not want somebody in your business directly, or maybe you do, or maybe you don't, but you're not thinking about those in between spaces of how many layers of communication someone is going to receive and interpret from what you put out there, particularly those that may be following you. And going to the piece of like the validation part, everyone follows you for a different reason. You're on social media for a different reason or reasons, so as diluted as it is, I think it just goes back to making sure that you're intentional about, your why for it all. We all follow some script, even if it's one that we picked up, one that we're curating. I just think that the narrative in itself is key for you to understand how that's being developed or evolving, because the script is one thing. The narrative is, that's what you become, And so I think I want to get us kicked off our daily bread today, as time trickles down for us here, just to talk about some things people can do from a self-reflective or awareness standpoint to ensure that they can delineate, between the two. And I'll kick us off in terms of a daily crumb that I can leave as we close out tonight's episode. Make sure that you can take those two words, sheeple and people, and define them for yourself. Because if you can do that, you will understand firsthand, what they are and what they mean to you. And if you can do that, you can remove yourself from either category and allow yourself to do whatever it is that you want to do with your life and how you want to do it. But you can understand the importance of knowing how to follow certain scripts and narrative to move you forward. So awareness is key, regardless of where you are on either side of the fence. I think self-empowerment comes from ensuring that you're not lost in the script or someone else's, making sure that the narrative that you're following, you are actually authoring. And in your social settings or in your professional settings, you understand the power of your voice. Separating the two from being a sheep or understanding yourself as a whole person is just that. The self-empowerment notion of understanding the power of your voice, because it is your voice that you can take forward and rewrite scripts, right? Recreate narratives that someone else is actually going to follow. So it is a cycle. I always say just make it a beautiful one.
That's good. To add to that, consider the entire script, right? A lot of times we think that in order to have a really good script, I want to omit the bad or dark things of my script. When we think about script and script writing, and script writing is all about character development. Yeah. Character development is all about the full story. If you're going to have character development, then that character has to have a backstory. And a lot of times we want to write out the backstory so we only see what's on my front stage, but not on the backstage. But in order to have a full character that is well developed, I have to have my backstory and my front story. I have to have my backstage behind closed doors and my front stage. And when the two meet, I get a full character. And so use both, use all of your script, whether it starts at home or whether it starts in constructs with someone else, or whether it starts with your own ideas, fuse them all together and use them to create the script that you were designed to walk out.
Yeah, that's good right there. Mm-hmm. I'm full, brother. I'm full. Close us out, Kurt.
Y'all know me, man. If we talking about, what we're talking about here is just thinking things through and having a reason for why you're doing it. Y'all gonna hear me say this all throughout CorNbReaD. If you can think it through and tell me why, that's really all that matters, because it's really none of my business anyway. We're talking about Sheeple. That is probably a person or a group of people talking about another person or a group of people. And between them, ain't nobody got, it's no business, right? It's no business what they calling me. And it's no business what I'm calling, So what we're really trying to do is understand other people who seemingly don't think as much as whatever the reference group is, right? And it's really none of your business. And again, to Ashley's point, they only showing you what they want to anyway. So if you're calling somebody a sheeple, you're probably not looking at all the information. So we might be the sheeple ourselves because it's easier to just label than it is to understand. So be careful with that word sheeple. It's kind of misleading. You really want to think it through and not be a sheeple yourself for doing so. So that's my CorNbReaD.
My heart.
I got
a good point of view. Nah, this is an important topic, and I think hopefully we've left some good nuggets for our viewers just to take on in this week, in their operations and making sure you can have the power of reflection, but also the power of execution when deciding and defining your own life. We want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. That's a wrap for us tonight. Again, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do click that subscription button. Definitely check us out on eatmorecornbread.com, social media platforms. Yes. Eat More CornbReaD at Eat More CornbReaD. Thank you for hanging out with us and sticking with us. And we look forward to bringing you some more funk next week.